Hello, good evening, folks. My name is Sasha, and I'm bringing a conversation with Claire from the Kanto region of Japan. She had a single lung transplant about 4 years ago from the University Hospital in Tokyo. Now, Claire had rheumatoid arthritis for almost 2 decades, which in turn attacked and damaged her small airways. As a result, she needed to have a transplant. Please, for more of these interesting conversations with lung transplant recipient, don't forget to like and subscribe on my YouTube channel, Lung Transplant Nation, and also on Instagram at Lung Transplant Nation. Thank you.
Good evening, good folks. How are you? This is Sasha from Lung Transplant Nation. I am so happy and grateful to have Claire with me. Now, she's from the Kanto region of Japan. She had a single lung transplant about 4 years ago. And I'm really excited to learn from her, or for her to share with you what was the process like. First of all, how she knew she was sick, and then what are the steps that happened. Because granted, I'm from the United States, I'm in New York, and so the system might be a little bit different. So I'm definitely hoping I could learn a lot from Claire. Claire, I know it's good morning for you.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine. I'm having a good day so far. Thank you.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Hopefully we'll continue. So please tell us a little bit about yourself, Claire, because I know you from what we talked about, you had a single lung transplant about 4 years ago, and you had bronchiolitis obliterans. I'm sure I'm butchering it, but if you can tell us a little bit about that and what took you from there to actually having a lung transplant.
Okay. I have had rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune disease for close to 2 decades. And that is the cause of my lung disease. When I was first diagnosed, the rheumatologist did say that there is a possibility that this disease could attack your other organs. And it did. About 8-9 years ago, I was teaching. I was a teacher for 20 years before I got ill. My commute was fairly harsh, 4 hours a day. I climbed a lot of stairs, and I stood up for a good 7-8 hours a day. And it was when I started feeling tightness in my chest and slight breathlessness that I knew there was something not quite right. So that's how it started, really.
Okay. And what were the next step? I mean, you said you had it for some years. Now, when did they actually diagnose the actual disease, and what did the doctors tell you as far as that, we did what we can, that you may have to have a lung transplant?
Well, the first step was to tell my rheumatologist about this. He initially thought it might be asthma. So he prescribed several inhalers, which I tried, and to no avail. It was then that he referred me to a lung consultant, a specialist, who immediately sent me for various tests. Now, the test results were somewhat shocking for him because by that point, I only had about 30% lung function. So I didn't even know that I was really, really sick, because having rheumatoid arthritis means you are fatigued almost all the time. So I just thought it was that, And the progression, I'm assuming, must have been quite slow, because I didn't really notice the shortness of breath until that point. And after the test came back, he came to the conclusion that I had bronchiolitis obliterans, but he wasn't sure. So he sent me to another specialist who just happened to be one of the top consultants in the country. Immediately, he said, I believe you have bronchiolitis obliterans, and referred me to Kyoto University Hospital for testing. That's how it really kicked off.
So picking up on your point, so the fact that it didn't really hit you that harshly, it was kind of hard for you to know, okay, there was something else besides rheumatoid arthritis, because which is, I wouldn't say fairly common, but it's a more common disease that people go through and we're able to live their lives. So yeah, so that's what I was gonna say. So you didn't feel like, even though you felt tired, but you didn't feel like you was so out of breath that you needed oxygen or anything like that. You just thought that it was just okay, I got arthritis, and that's par, right? That's par from it. So once the specialists themselves said, hey, you may have this one, and then we get you tested. So once the results came back and they said, yes, this is what you have, which I looked it up a little bit the other day, was that, I mean, scary thing, they said this is a disease that within, once you have it, there's a chance that within 6 years it could be deadly. I was like, wow, this is some serious stuff. So once the expert told you this is what you had, what were the next step? What happened?
Oh, the next step was to go for transplant evaluation, which I did. And that lasted 2 weeks. In Japan, they do that as an inpatient. We can't just go for a couple of days and get some testing. It was very extensive, and they wanted to talk to me a lot about my condition and my medical history.
Okay.
At the end of that 2 weeks, however, because I still wasn't on oxygen, they said, you can hang on to these lungs a bit longer. It's a bit too early for you to have a transplant at this point, which was a bit shocking, because I thought, well, I'm really out of breath right now.
Mm-hmm.
And my life is not, as it used to be. It was like 180-degree change from what my life was to suddenly being so out of breath that I had to be in a wheelchair. But I accepted that, and I went away, and I waited another 2 years before I was evaluated again. At the time, during my first evaluation, the surgeon told me, he said, it is best to hang on to your old lungs as long as possible, because we do not know what the outcome will be of a lung transplant. And the years post lung transplant, we don't know what difficulties you might run into. So his advice was to hang on to my old lungs as long as possible, which I did.
Okay.
So then I went for the second evaluation. 2 years later, I was already on oxygen. And at that point, they came to the conclusion that I was ready. So we went forward with it.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, and I'm sure there was a lot there to take from, you commuting 4 hours and walking all those flight of stairs and then till like, oh my God, I'm on oxygen. So what were, besides the medical, what were your personal feelings at the time with regards to, when it dawned on you, okay, I'm going to have transplant, you know what I mean? So what were your personal emotions at the time? Because I can only imagine, because for me as a double lung transplant recipient, I was all over the place. I really had to get into meditating to really try to narrow it down, because my feelings were all over the place. On one hand, I was like excited, to be okay, I'm going to be on the list and so forth and so on. And the other one, I was scared. I'm not going to lie to you. It's a scary thing. So what were your emotions at the time? What kind of feelings were you doing?
Well, initially, I think I was pretty numb. I did not really let it register as to the enormity of what was before me. It wasn't until my school returned all my belongings in a box. They sent it to my address because they knew I couldn't go back. I had to resign from my job. And as I opened that box and unpacked all my teaching materials, my notes, my pens, my, just papers and some notes from the kids, it just suddenly dawned on me that this was a huge undertaking. And that's when I allowed myself, I think, to fall apart for a couple of days. But then I realized it's either sink or swim.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, yeah. I mean, I can understand the emotion when that hits you, because it became true. Yeah, I definitely can empathize because it's almost like, I went through a similar thing as far as when it hit you for real, and being on oxygen, and doctors saying like, listen, this is your option. So once okay, unfortunately, you lost your job, they had to let you go because they know you couldn't come. And now, what was the timeline with your doctors as far as like, were you listed at the time, or did they decide to put you on the list, and did they give you an idea how long it would take? Because just to give you a quick example, in the States, it's very different. For me, I was on the list, I would say March of 2021, and I got transplanted in October. I know some people that I talked to that, even to the Facebook group that we belong to, Lung Transplant Taking Flights, which is a nice group on Facebook. Um, some people get it in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Some people get it in a week. I had this person. I was part of this group chat. I mean, literally, he had these lungs the next day. I was like, oh my goodness. But it is what it is. So carry on. So they tell you, they're putting you on the list. And what did they tell you about the weight and what you needed to do to?
Well, in Japan, we have a very small donor pool. There's various reasons for that. Some are cultural. Not everyone thinks that organ donation is for them, which is understandable. Culture is a difficult aspect of it. Yes.
Yeah, culture is really huge and difficult sometimes to overcome, and there's no one to blame. It is what it is. I totally understand.
It's exactly.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
That piqued my curiosity. I was like, well, yeah. So culture is one. What do you think the other reasons? I mean, if you're not comfortable to, go into it, that's fine. From what I was told here in this country, unfortunately, a lot of it is accidents, cars, especially motorcycle accidents. Or some other, God forbid, some other disease or some, natural causes. Usually it's, the organs. It's unfortunate, it's a lot of accidents. But then again, we're a nation of 340 million people. So
Yeah.
the greater pool and the way the system is set up, I'm in New York. I could have registered hospital in Pennsylvania, that's not too far, or in New Jersey. So I could even have gone to like South Carolina, anywhere. So it gives you that option. As long as you have the right insurance, it gives you that option to list in multiple places. It's not necessarily the greatest thing, because if you're very far and then you got a call, you got to run right away. And then if it's not the right line, so you got to get, so it's not, but you do have the option. It doesn't mean it's necessarily, but go ahead.
Well,
so
we don't have that option. We get to be at one hospital and just one hospital.
Okay.
So yeah, the wait time for us on average for lungs in Japan is 2 years.
Okay.
I got my lung 2 years and 3 months of waiting. So I waited 2 years just over 2 years for my lung. However, I did not feel like it was too bad waiting, because I managed during that time to pursue some hobbies that I never thought I would do.
Yeah, more free time in your hands, right?
I wasn't working, and I felt like I needed to keep my mind occupied. So I started dabbling in miniature villages, which
that's awesome.
Yes, it was awesome.
Gotta send me some pictures. That is awesome.
And I was very lucky that I have a dog who got me up every morning and made sure that I did my walk. He's really my personal trainer. Yeah, it really kept me physically quite fit to go in for the transplant. So it is difficult because more than half of our recipients waiting for transplant will pass away before they get their call.
Oh, okay.
So in America, I think you have a higher chance of, well, survival because don't have to wait quite as long as we do.
Well, yeah, it's the luck of the draw, quote unquote, and it's also what region you're in, and that has a lot to do with it. Because I mean, like I said, I was on, I was listed in March, and I wasn't getting any call, and I was hospitalized in August because things got so bad. My oxygen at home wasn't enough, so I had to go 24/7 oxygen, high flow oxygen, so it took me, a little bit, to wait to get my transplant. And on top of that, I had 6 dry runs. So before I got transplanted on the 7th. So yes, it can be mentally, physically taxing, but it's also the luck of the draw in this country. Like I said before, some people get it right away, and others have it a lot longer. But going in, I got 18 months to 2 years. So mentally, you were kind of prepared and ready for that. Right?
Yes, it was a lot of mental preparation, which I found quite helpful, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I was glad for that time. Let's put it that way. I made good use of that time.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, listen, absolutely. Sometimes you take something that's can be awful, that can be taxing, and turn it around, and use it to the best, make the best, out of it that you can. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a necessity.
No, I totally agree. No, I really, even at the transplant group, when people post things, one thing I tell them is, hey, mentally, you got to be there. It's not easy. You got to be strong, but you also got to do your part. You have to exercise, work out, because I did what we call pulmonary rehab over here. Once a week. I had to. So you really, even with the oxygen, the tank, you have to get your body physically ready for it, because it's it's a surgery that shocks the body. It's a real.
Certainly.
So
yes.
Definitely mentally and physically, in as healthy as you can, because everybody's different.
Yes.
So once you were listed and so you use that time to make the small villages and get your own personal trainer. That was awesome. How often did you have to see your doctor, as far as like them checking you, make sure you were not getting any worse, and so on?
Well, I saw the doctor at Tokyo University, which is ultimately where I had my transplant, probably once every 4 months. And he would give me little updates as to where he thought I might be on the list. Secretly, I think he knew, but he wasn't allowed to say.
I know.
And nearer the time, he sort of dropped a hint, and he said, "You'll probably get your call within the year." So, yeah, they did test me quite extensively to see where I was standing, but luckily I did not decline terribly. I did lose more lung function, but not to the point that I could no longer walk. I could walk, but I needed to walk and then sit in the wheelchair and, just switch about when I was just too tired. So they were very conscientious watching my numbers.
Yeah, which is great, because you can know how you feel, but it's good to hear from the professional. And that's one thing too, because with my doctors, I 100% trust in their judgment, because these people are responsible for me to get new lungs and gotten new lungs. So I have no reason to question them and not to really rely on them. I mean, they are the professionals, so who am I?
Yes, exactly.
So to me, that's key. That's key, that there is a trust factor between doctors and patients. So as you going through the process, you waiting. I know that affected your life, to a certain extent, because you were limited. So it's great that you developed some hobbies. So as you were getting closer to your date, and I'm sure you probably didn't know for sure, but tell me when they actually told you, okay, was it like a week prior? Was it like a month prior? How did you find out you were getting close, at least you were getting your transplant?
Well, I suppose it was the last visit before my transplant when the doctor said, "You're not far now." And I think that was all he would say, "You're not far now." And that made me quite worried because I was ready. I had spent the last 2 years reading everything I could about lung transplants, and I really refused to go in blind. I wanted to know everything, even if some of it wasn't quite so palatable. But when he told me that I was close, I still had a bit of fear, even though I had prepared myself mentally and physically as much as I could. But yeah, I was ready, but nervous.
Oh,
I think it's natural. Yeah.
absolutely. We can put up a brave face, but man, because trust me, I remember every time they said, okay, we find a possible lung, looks like it's a match. Relief and anxiety at the same time, if you can
Yeah.
understand that. So it's like, oh, and then the third feeling is when it's not a match, not disappointment. So so
Yeah.
you go to all the roller
You got the
coaster.
waves.
Yes,
Yes.
ocean. It's yes, it's definitely an interesting fact. But explain to me now. Once obviously they do all the prep work, they know what your type is, what kind of lines you're looking for, and so forth and so on. Did you have a dry run by any chance, or was that the lungs that they found for you were the right lungs? And secondly, um, take me to how did that happen? How did that call happen?
Mm. I never had a dry run. This was the only call I got.
That's awesome.
Um, I just happened to be very tired that day, and I was chatting to a very dear friend. And I was thinking, well, it was funny, a coincidence that I was thinking, thank goodness they haven't called me because I'm just too tired to go all the way to Tokyo today. Cue telephone ring, and my surgeon's on the other end. He said, Nagata-san, we have uh, a lung for you. You're at the top of the list. Will you accept? Because we have the option to say no if we feel like we'd like more time, or we don't feel well, or we have a fever. We can say no. But without hesitancy, I said yes. I will accept it. So he said, don't rush. Just come in. Before 4 p.m. Don't rush. It's all right. Of course, I dropped everything.
Everything
It's
else
easy
becomes
to say.
relevant.
Yeah, everything is irrelevant. I just dropped everything. I rang my daughter, who was at her part-time job nearby. At the time, she was a university student just finishing university, and she rushed home. We called a taxi and took a 2-hour drive right into Tokyo. It was a nightmare drive because the taxi just happened to be really old, and the air conditioning was not working, and both of us were sweating profusely. The taxi driver was nervous because my daughter was ringing her potential employer, telling them my mother needs to have an emergency operation. I think that didn't help the taxi driver. He just sort of tried to rush, but traffic was such. So yeah, it was quite nerve-wracking getting there. And by the time I got there, funnily, I thought, well, I'm actually going to be glad to be under anesthetic because I need a sleep now. So that was the ride in. And when I got there, it was all a whirlwind of IV drips and doctors coming in and telling me again what the risks were, just to make sure I was completely on board. I had to sign certain documents. I can't even tell you what they were, but
Everything is a blur. Everything is a blur. And
exactly.
and trust me, like I met so many doctors. I'm like, I didn't see that person before. I mean, you have doctors, at least over here, I like doctors coming out of the woodwork. I'm like, I'm so and so, I'm so and so. I was like, oh my goodness, there are like 12 people in front of me. I'm like, anyway, that's just it's over,
Yes.
it's overwhelming. It can be overwhelming.
It was overwhelming, and I had a liaison officer, I think that's what they're called, come in, or a layperson, just to make sure that I was undergoing this operation of my own free will and not being, you know, coerced into it in any way. So I had to tell him, yes, I'm totally on board with this. Let's get going. So it was quite a memorable day, I must say. Mm.
So I know it's been 4 years since. So once they took you in, they did all the tests, um, and they told you the lung was the right lung for you. Um, take us to, I guess, post surgery. Post surgery.
Mm.
Once you finally came through, you remember what went through your mind, what was going on, and how long was
Mm. I remember exactly what I thought. I wriggled my toes and said, well, I'm alive. That's what I said to myself. That was the moment when I knew somehow I got through this.
you made it to the other side of it? Yes.
Yeah, I made it to the other side. And the next thing I knew, I was aware was that I had the, what do you call it? The tube.
Yeah.
Intubator, that's right, down my throat. And I knew that would be bad, but I wished they had given me more sedatives because I was so aware that it was there.
It was there. It's a funny
Yeah.
feeling. It's hard to explain, but it's a funny feeling. But yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't very pleasant. I'll just put it that way.
I hear you, Claire. Trust me. I hear you.
Mm.
So, how long did you stay in the hospital? I mean, that's first of all, that I want to say that's great that when you came through, you were able to wiggle your toes and all that. That's awesome because my right leg, I couldn't move it for about 3 weeks.
Oh.
Because yeah, I had what you call ECMO. They had put ECMO on to for the blood, and something went a little skewed, I would say, and then it damaged the right leg, the vein in the right leg. So I couldn't move my right leg and I still wear a little brace on my knee. But yeah, so that was tough because when I came through, still in a daze
Mm.
and whew, man, it's hard sometimes when you think back. I mean, from what my wife told me, because sometimes your memory of the time because you were under some sedative, but it's they had to put me in on an induced coma. They had said because they were afraid that I had some brain damage from the surgery.
Mm.
I had to have infusion and all that. So they literally took about 5 days to quote unquote wake me up because I remember that they tried to come in and talk to me, but I wasn't giving them the feedback that they needed. So yeah, mine was pretty challenging. And it was October 21st, and I got to go home on December 9th. That's
Mm.
6 weeks plus in the hospital. Just so we got to see you. How long do you remember how long you stayed in the hospital after?
Well, from all my reading of lung transplants, it seemed important to me to get on my feet as soon as possible. This was the impression I got. So I really tried with rehab and getting up and pulling myself up in bed and trying to sit down, and so much so that the nurses told me to stop it.
At least you had the energy and you had the vigor to do that. That's awesome.
Yes, they kept telling me off for, just being a bit too enthusiastic with trying to get better. But I stayed in the hospital for 4 weeks. And when I left, they told me, we don't often have patients who leave after a transplant at 4 weeks. They tend to keep patients in the hospital for quite a while as compared to the United States. They do all sorts of things to make sure that once you get home, you're able to function and you're not going to be, bedbound, really. So yes, 4 weeks, and really it went by so fast. And by the time I left, I was walking. I didn't need any aid or oxygen or anything. I think the first week post, I was walking, and soon after they had me on a stationary bike.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it wasn't easy though, I must say.
Oh,
Just
no,
about
yeah.
5 minutes of pedaling and I was completely exhausted, you know. It took a lot of, it was painful as well, and it took a lot of sort of gritting my teeth and saying, right, you've got to do this, you've got to get up today, you've got to wash your hair. And I did every single day for those 4 weeks that I was there, just to get myself into the frame of mind that I was going to, you know, get my life back somehow. You know?
You definitely have to have the will to do so, the will to carry on. I'm telling you, it's really not. It's not easy, but it's definitely something that's. I guess if we both here, that's definitely worth it.
Hello, folks. I hope you enjoyed the first part of my conversation with Claire. In the second part, she talks more in depth about post-transplant, what her life is like. So please don't forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Lung Transplant Nation, and also on Instagram. Thank you.